One of the most controversial characters in Boruto is undoubtedly Code. He's probably the most hated on villain in the entire series and maybe even the whole franchise, but does Code actually deserve all the hate that he gets? Is he a complete waste of a character and villain? Does he just need more time to prove himself? Or is he actually a great character and villain and people are just wrong about him and what role he's meant to play? I think it's about time I had an honest discussion about Code and his effectiveness as a villain, as an antagonist, and as a character in general, breaking down what he's done well, where he might be lacking, and the direction he might be heading moving forward. Now, I'm drawing a distinction between these three roles because they are not the same thing. You can have a great and effective villain who's not a particularly compelling character, and likewise you can have a super compelling character who's not a particularly great villain. Similarly, you can have an antagonist who's not a villain, and you can have a villain who's not even an antagonist. For example, Light Yagami is the protagonist of Death Note and is clearly portrayed as being the bad guy who's tricked himself into thinking he's a hero, while L is the main antagonist despite the fact that he's actually just trying to catch the villain who is Light Yagami. The villain is just the bad guy, while the antagonist opposes the protagonist and stands in the way of their goals. Now in the case of Code, he is a character who just so happens to be an antagonist, and he's an antagonist who just so happens to be a villain, as is the case of every other villain in Naruto and Boruto, and is usually the case in most stories. But because each role is different, I want to take a look at Code from the perspective of each role separately, starting with Code as an antagonist. So the question is, what makes a good antagonist? A good antagonist will provide conflict by opposing the protagonist, creating some sort of roadblock between the protagonist and their goals, either by directly standing in the protagonist's way, or by influencing the world around them in a way that directly impacts the protagonist. In doing so, the antagonist pushes the protagonist into a corner, forcing them to take off their narrative mask and confront their wounds in order to overcome the conflict before them and grow as a character. So to examine the effectiveness of an antagonist, you need to look at how the protagonist changes and how the antagonist affected the protagonist or the world around them to cause the protagonist to undergo that change. Now in the Code arc, Kawaki is the protagonist and Code is the antagonist, while Momoshiki is an overarching villain who plays a significant role as well. Kawaki wants to protect Naruto in the Leaf Village, while Code wants to kill Naruto and destroy the Leaf Village, and Kawaki plans to sacrifice himself to Code so that Code will spare Naruto in the Leaf Village, while Code plans to spare Kawaki for Eida's sake and kill Naruto and everyone else in the Leaf Village. Code literally couldn't be more diametrically opposed to Kawaki and his goals. This is a good thing. Now let's examine Kawaki's wound, mask, and inner conflict that is focused on in this specific arc. Kawaki's wound is his suffering caused by Ishiki's karma seal. His mask is his belief that he doesn't want or need the karma seal like Amato says he does, and his unwillingness to accept Amato's reconstructed karma seal, and his inner conflict is his fear of losing his father Naruto. So with all of this in mind, let's look at what Code has accomplished as an antagonist so far. To start, just the idea of Code strikes fear into Kawaki's heart throughout the majority of this arc, and this fear alone creates internal conflict for Kawaki and drives his development and decision making throughout this arc. Code is literally the reason why Kawaki fears losing his father Naruto in the first place. And in the first several chapters of the Code arc, we see Kawaki's growing frustration about everyone's inability to face Code and his tremendous power. Kawaki felt Code's wrath as a kid. He knows that Code is stronger than Boro and Delta even with his limiters on. Amato tells Kawaki that Naruto would most likely die in a 1v1 against Code, and Kawaki and Code also believe this to be the case. This causes Kawaki to throw a fit in chapter 58 because he knows just how much stronger Code is compared to them right now, and he ultimately decides they have no chance of winning and decides to just sacrifice himself instead. However, Kawaki's plan utterly fails. Code doesn't care and just beats Kawaki up, dragging Kawaki even further into hopelessness because of his inability to protect Naruto. So far, Code has been an effective antagonist for Kawaki. Then Boruto shows up, and Code becomes the catalyst for Boruto's power progression when he taps further into his Karma Seal's power than ever before, which is also good on Code's part. However, Boruto's new power still isn't enough to defeat Code, and so Momoshiki takes over to face Code instead. This is very important. Code is the narrative reason why Momoshiki even steps in to begin with. So then Momoshiki beats up Code until Naruto shows up, which completely wrecks Kawaki because the whole reason he even left to begin with was to protect Naruto. But now Naruto is standing before the two threats who can actually kill Naruto. Momoshiki, and Code. And that's when Code brings Kawaki to his lowest point of the entire arc by putting Naruto in a no-win situation. He cleverly takes Shikamaru hostage and forces Naruto to stand still at the threat of killing Shikamaru, knowing that Naruto won't sacrifice Shikamaru for his own sake. As a result, Momoshiki stops attacking Code and instead decides to help Code kill Naruto, who is forced to stand still because of Code. It's at this moment that Kawaki's feeling of hopelessness reaches its absolute maximum. He is at his lowest point. Naruto is about to die. This forces Kawaki to take off his mask and confront his wound that has plagued him throughout the entire arc, the Karma Seal. Kawaki was unwilling to accept Amato's reconstructed Karma Seal because of the suffering the Karma Seal has caused him in the past. But it's here that he finally takes off that mask and overcomes this wound, coming to terms with his dependency on the Karma Seal in order to gain the power to protect Naruto, someone who Kawaki loves even more than he hates Karma. And after overcoming his wound, Kawaki is then able to defeat both Momoshiki and Code, allowing Kawaki to solve his inner conflict in this arc. In this manner, Code very effectively executed his role as an antagonist during this arc, and it's for that reason that this part of the arc was so well received and Code was a lot more well liked at the time. So then where did Code go wrong?
Hashirama, where did I go wrong?
The Code hate really kicked in at the end of this arc, when Amato finally removed Code's limiters and restored his true power that was hyped up for so long, but then he proceeded to get raffle stomped by Damon in the very next chapter, and Eida and Damon parted ways with Code and joined the Leaf Village immediately afterwards. And then at the start of part 2, Boruto put his stinky shoes on Code's face, and Code looked pretty silly when it happened, and in chapter 2, Boruto was talking some serious trash about how easy it'll be to kill Code, while also slashing down his Claw Grime army with ease. As a result, Code has entirely lost his menacing presence as a villain, a necessary trait for a great villain. I think this is where people's distaste towards Code originates from, and where he falls short and lags behind other Naruto and Boruto villains. When compared to Zabuza, Orochimaru, Gaara in the Chunin exams and Konoha Crush arcs, Madara Uchiha, Pain, Obito, Deepa, and Jigen, Code just doesn't feel very menacing, even though he's actually way stronger than all of them. This wasn't always the case though. In the first half of the Code arc, Code actually does feel menacing. He's built up to be a threat that's stronger than Delta and Boro, and possibly stronger than Naruto and Sasuke 1v1 at their peak, let alone after they got nerfed. Furthermore, Code is the entire reason for Kawaki's intense anxiety throughout this arc. Kawaki had nightmares about this dude, and he was worried sick that Code would kill Naruto. He scared Kawaki to no end. That is exactly what a menacing villain does, and when Kawaki ran into Code in chapter 62, it was very intense and suspenseful, as Code refused Kawaki's offer and proceeded to beat the crap out of him, and then he goes on to easily beat Boruto up in chapter 63. However, things start to change in chapter 64 when Boruto awakens a new level of power that can actually rival Code's. Of course, Code is still just playing around at this point, and he's ultimately the last one standing when Boruto has a heart attack at the end of the chapter, but both Boruto and Kawaki now fear Code considerably less than they did before. And it's at this moment that Momoshiki takes over and things really go downhill for Code, as Momoshiki completely dominates Code and demonstrates that he is the most fearsome villain, and then Kawaki goes on to defeat Momoshiki and dominate Code as well, demonstrating that he can handle both Code and Momoshiki. At this point, Boruto and Kawaki no longer really fear Code, causing the fans to no longer fear Code either. Even Shikamaru is more concerned about the problem Kawaki is becoming than he is about Code who escaped. Of course, we know that Code is still a very powerful threat, who will likely become stronger than both Momoshiki and Kawaki once his limiters are removed, and he also still has Eida and Damon on his side, who are the strongest people alive on Earth. So Code is still a threat overall, and we have reason to fear him in the future, but as soon as Code gets those limiters removed and becomes the threat he was hyped up to be, he just gets destroyed by Damon, and Eida and Damon join the Leaf Village instead of assisting Code, making Code's threat level plummet considerably, despite the fact that he just powered up. And then when we get into the Prophecy arc, all of the focus is on Momoshiki and Kawaki. The villain that is driving Kawaki insane is Momoshiki now instead of Code. All of Kawaki's frustration in dialogue specifically points to his fear of Momoshiki killing Naruto and destroying the Leaf Village that Naruto cherishes, not that Code will do it. Yes, Kawaki is aware of the fact that Code technically threatens Naruto in the village too, but all of the emphasis is on Momoshiki. As a result, it makes the fans focus way more on Momoshiki as a threat than it does Code, even though logically Code is actually the bigger threat than Momoshiki is. Likewise, Kawaki is the one who attacks Boruto and Sarada and seals Naruto and Hinata away, not Code. So even though Code should be stronger than Kawaki at this point, Kawaki is the one who actually strikes fear and feels like a threat. Furthermore, after Amato informs Shikamaru that he removed Code's limiters, making Code a threat exceeding even Jigen, Shikamaru just says in chapter 73 that Code's power should still be less than Nishiki Otsutsuki's, so while he's definitely a formidable foe, we should be able to deal with him. So even Shikadere doesn't even really fear Code. And then when we cut to part 2, Boruto makes his entrance by making Code smell his stinky feet and proceeds to trash talk the crap out of Code and his army, ultimately making Code feel as menacing than he could have otherwise. It's not about how strong or dangerous Code actually is, it's about everyone's perception of Code. Nobody is scared of Code anymore. That's why he doesn't feel as menacing as Zabuza, Orochimaru, Gaara, Madara, Pain, Obito, Diba, or Jigen. Furthermore, Code hasn't achieved a frightening accomplishment or delivered a devastating loss to the main characters like other villains have. Zabuza trapped Kakashi in a water prison jutsu, and we learn that Zabuza annihilated his entire academy class in order to pass the Blood Mist Village graduation exam. Orochimaru branded Sasuke with the curse mark, killed the Kazekage, and killed the Hokage. Gaara brutally murdered his opponents in the Force of Death, broke the second exam record by a significant amount, defeated 5th Gate Rock Lee, killed some random ninja before fighting Sasuke, and defeated Sasuke in the Force and nearly killed him before Naruto arrived. Pain killed Jiraiya, Kakashi, and a ton of Leaf villagers, completely destroyed the entire village, and had Naruto completely pinned down while he gave him a speech about the cycle of hatred. Madara stomped the 5 Kage at the same time. Deepa scared Boruto and Sarada shitless and gave them depression by mollywopping him so bad. Jigen defeated Naruto and Sasuke at their full power at the same time, and so on. Code fulfills his narrative role by pushing Kawaki to wish for his karma seal back like he explained earlier, but he never achieves a frightening victory or delivers a devastating loss to the main characters the same way that these other villains have. This makes Code feel like less of a threat than he otherwise should. It also doesn't help that he's constantly surrounded by people who are smarter than him or have more intel than him, making him look dumber than he otherwise should. Eida always made Code seem like he's acting like an idiot. Damon made Code look like a fool for having no clue how strong Damon actually was. Shikamaru made Code look silly by intentionally drawing Code out in chapter 68. Amato made Code look like a hot-headed idiot in chapter 71, and specifically said that Code is not particularly bright in chapter 61, and Boruto is making Code seem like an idiot for not knowing the truth about the Ten Tails. Code isn't actually all that stupid and has been shown to be pretty clever at times, but he's always lacking vital information or juxtaposed with a character like Amato, who's insanely smart, making Code feel stupid by comparison. A villain with intelligence is a very menacing threat, so when the audience and the other characters think that Code is kinda stupid, it makes him feel a lot less menacing than he otherwise could, especially when compared to intelligent villains like Zabuza, Orochimaru, Pain, Obito, Madara, Jigen, and so on. I also think design plays a huge role in this too. Code just doesn't look very menacing compared to other Naruto and Boruto villains. Orochimaru's creepy smile and snake-like appearance, Pain's piercings and majestic Rinnegan eyes, Zabuza's bandages and giant sword, Gaara's demonic appearance, Madara's cold stare that's always looking down on people, Jigen's menacing glare and alien-like horn, and so on, are all just way more menacing than Code's long eyelashes and colonial founding father vampire outfit. Code looks like he's ready to read off the Declaration of Independence or start his sentences with 7 years ago. It's just not that scary looking. Code looked the most menacing when he wore the Kara cloak during the Code arc, like when he invaded Boru's hideout and beat up Kawaki and Boruto. And not surprisingly, that's also when Code actually felt the most menacing. The design does make a difference. Likewise, personality also plays a big role. Orochimaru's creepy and twisted personality, Madara's incredibly confident demeanor, Obito's nonchalant personality as the masked man, Hidan and Deepa's comical yet sadistic personality, Zabuza's cold-blooded assassin personality, Pain's god persona and cold-bloodedness, and Gaara's demonic and murderous way of life are simply way more menacing than Code's Otsutsuki fanboy personality and its obsession with Eida. Now I will admit that Code's nonchalantness was very enjoyable like Obito's was as the masked man, and it's something I've always liked about Code, but he hasn't really displayed that for a while. He's just not that menacing at the end of the day, and I think this is the underlying reason why a lot of people don't like Code. That being said, I don't think this is the end of the world just yet. For one thing, none of this negates what Code did as an antagonist for Kawaki previously. Code still fulfilled his role as an antagonist during the Code arc. This stuff with Damon afterwards has nothing to do with Kawaki anymore, outside of bolstering Code's rage towards Kawaki. Now, if Kawaki hypothetically just beat Code up in Chapter 62, like Damon did without ever needing to confront his inner conflict first, then yeah, that would be a problem, but that's not even close to what actually happened. And more importantly, I think we have a perfect opportunity to display Code's true power and make him a menacing threat right now in the current events of the manga. Yeah, I know Boruto was talking some mad trash to Code in Chapter 2, but these threats don't mean anything until we actually see Boruto easily kill Code like he said he could. Code thought he could beat Damon and was talking some trash, and look how that turned out. Kiba and Neji trash talked Naruto, but look who won those fights. Naruto and Sasuke were talking trash to Jigen, but look how that turned out for them. I could give countless examples of characters talking trash to their opponent but still losing the fight, main character or not, so this doesn't actually mean anything other than that Boruto's swag has increased. Now Boruto will probably surprise Code with his new Rasengan Uzuhiko Jutsu to give it a cool debut, but it's probably not going to one-shot Code and kill him for good. It could easily be just like Sasuke's Kirin vs Itachi. It looked super cool and it seemed like it killed Itachi, but it turns out Itachi was fine because he had the Susanoo and Yata mirror. So even if Boruto gets Code pretty good with his new jutsu, as long as Code's still fine and Annie and able to keep fighting, then it's perfectly fine. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter!
What matters is how Code responds and what he's able to accomplish afterwards. He has all the opportunity in the world to achieve a frightening victory, or to deliver a devastating loss to Boruto in the Leaf Village, and he has all the opportunity in the world to become a menacing threat once again. It all depends on what Code does moving forward. I think the whole Code is a walking L thing has been blown way out of proportion, and I'll admit that I make fun of Code all the time and will definitely continue to do so, but if we're being honest, Code actually hasn't taken as many L's as people think. Being as pedantic and disingenuously ridiculous as possible, he's only taken at most 7 L's. He failed to be a vessel for Ishiki Otsutsuki, he lost his god Ishiki, he lost to Borushiki, Kawashiki, and Damon, Eida didn't have feelings for Code and instead was all eyes for Kawaki, Eida ditched Code and broke their alliance, and then Boruto put his stinky shoes on Code's face in Chapter 1 of Part 2. That's it. That's 6 L's in Part 1 and 1 L in Part 2 at the absolute max. If we tally up all of Sasuke's L's in Part 1, you'll quickly see that Code doesn't actually have that many. Kakashi made Sasuke look like a fool in the bell test, Sasuke was knocked unconscious against Haku and Naruto had to carry afterwards, Sasuke got completely destroyed by Rock Lee before the Chunin exams, Sasuke was scared out of his mind against Orochimaru, while Naruto wasn't and needed Naruto and Sakura in order to gain the courage to actually face Orochimaru. Sasuke lost to Gaara in the forest during the Konoha Crush arc and had to be saved by Naruto. Sasuke got completely wrecked by Itachi and put in a coma until Naruto and Jiraiya brought Tsunade back to heal him. Sasuke made a smaller hole in the water tank than Naruto did during the rooftop fight. Sasuke got beat up by the Sound Four, and Sasuke also lost his entire clan to his brother Itachi. So in just Part 1 alone, we already have 9 L's from the second main character and final antagonist of the series, not to mention all of Sasuke's L's in Part 2, which are just as plentiful. But despite that, nobody complained about Sasuke being a walking L and a waste of an antagonist. Let's look at Orochimaru next. Orochimaru lost his arms and his ability to use most ninjutsu in his battle against Hiruzen. He failed to destroy the Leaf Village. He lost to Minato for the title of 4th Hokage. He admits he's weaker than Itachi, implying that he lost to Itachi in the past. He ultimately loses to Jiraiya and Tsunade in the Sannin deadlock and gets punched around like a ragdoll by Tsunade. He loses his whole Sound 5 team, and then he fails to take Sasuke's body at the end of Part 1 because Sasuke arrives too late thanks to the Sasuke retrieval team delaying the Sound 4. So in just Part 1 alone, Orochimaru took 5 on-screen L's and 2 off-screen L's in the past that we were told about, giving him 7 L's in total. But again, nobody complained about Orochimaru being a walking L. What about Madara then? Madara couldn't skip rocks as far as Hashirama. He admits he's weaker than Hashirama to his father and brother Izuna because Hashirama always had the edge when they trained together. He fails to protect all of his brothers. He loses to Hashirama before they join forces and form the Leaf Village. He loses to Hashirama for the title of Hokage, even though Hashirama tried to let Madara be the first Hokage. He loses to Hashirama again when he tries to destroy the village with the Nine Tails. He's brought back as an Edo Tensei with Hashirama's cells and powers and a Rinnegan, and still loses to Edo Hashirama. And then he's backstabbed by Black Zetsu and discovers that he's been a pawn the entire time. That's 8 L's for Madara, someone who's regarded as one of the best villains in the Naruto franchise alongside Orochimaru, Sasuke, Pain, and Obito. And I can go on and do this with a bunch of other characters. It's fun to tease Code for taking L's and he has lost 3 major fights, but he hasn't actually taken the most L's in this series so far like a lot of people think. And even if he did, the narrative losses a character faces are what push them forward and make them evolve as characters. It's literally what makes them an interesting character. Just look at Sasuke. Every time Sasuke took an L in the 9 examples I listed earlier, it drove him forward in a meaningful way. When Naruto lost to Sasuke at the end of part 1 and failed to keep his promise of a lifetime to Sakura, it drove Naruto forward in a meaningful way. When Kakashi lost Obito, Rin, and Minato, it changed Kakashi's character in a meaningful way. When Itachi failed to stop the coup d'etat in a non-violent way and admitted his failures and where he went wrong to Sasuke, it added depth to Itachi's character, and we can literally go on and on with almost every single character in Naruto. Taking an L isn't a bad thing in a story. It's actually a good thing for character development. Remember, Code is an antagonist, a villain, and a character, so there's going to be times when Code pushes the protagonist into a corner to make them change, and there's going to be times when Code is pushed into a corner to make him change, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's literally a good thing, and it happened to every other single major villain in Naruto too. Obito lost Rin and it changed him. Naruto narratively pushed Obito into a corner to make him take off his mask and reflect on his true self, restoring Obito back to Obito. Madara lost his brothers and lost to Hashirama more than once and it changed him. Orochimaru lost his parents and watched people die and it changed him. He lost to Itachi, which is why he went after Sasuke instead, and he lost his arms in his fight against Hiruzen, but he kept pushing forward as a menacing threat anyway. Nagato lost his parents and his best friend Yahiko and it changed him. Sasuke lost to Gaara while Naruto didn't and it changed Sasuke, and so on. A villain is allowed to lose. They just need to affect the protagonist in a meaningful way, which so far Code has done for Kawaki and hopefully has or will do to Boruto too. And for anyone who's really hung up on Code's L's and is upset about him not feeling like a menacing threat anymore, I think you need to take your eyes off Code and start pointing your fingers at Momoshiki instead, because the exact same thing happened to Momoshiki in chapter 80, except it was 10 times worse. Unlike Code, Momoshiki actually was the villain of part 1 of Boruto, and up until chapter 80, Momoshiki actually felt like a menacing threat because of his dark prophecy for Boruto, where Momoshiki was going to take over Boruto's mind and body, which was the overarching conflict of part 1. But instead, Boruto just told Momoshiki he's wrong and that he's not sad or afraid, and Momoshiki just threw a hissy fit and failed to take over Boruto's mind, turning him into the least menacing villain in Boruto in my opinion. So if there's anyone you guys should have beef with, it's Momoshiki, not Code. Momoshiki aside though, Code's lasting impression as an antagonist and as a villain is going to be defined by what he does moving forward. If Code just dies fighting Boruto right now and never affects his character on a deeper level, I'm not gonna sit here and say that Code was a particularly great antagonist after the Code arc. But until that happens, I have no reason to assume he's going to be such an underwhelming antagonist and villain. I expect a lot more than that. And now I finally want to talk about Code as a character for a little bit. So what makes a good character? Good characters can possess a variety of different traits, but it is essential that they fulfill their role in the story in accordance with their character archetype for them to be an effective character, and it is essential that they have a character arc for them to be a compelling character. And a truly great character is both effective and compelling. Now when it comes to Code, he very much fulfilled his role in the story as the antagonist for Kawaki during the Code arc as I explained earlier, and he very much fulfills his role as a villain by doing bad things to move the plot forward, even if he isn't the most menacing villain around. And the way Code does this is by bringing about threats even greater than himself, very similar to Madara and especially Kabuto in the War arc, but I'll save the in-depth discussion of that for a separate video. But this means that in part 1, Code is technically an effective character. He's a good antagonist and villain, contrary to what a lot of people seem to think. He's not the best antagonist or villain in Naruto. I don't think he was even supposed to be the biggest villain in Boruto, but he does the job he needs to do in part 1, especially for Kawaki's character, meaning he is an effective character. But is he a compelling character? I think the setup and potential is there, it just hasn't been paid off yet. We have yet to learn Code's backstory to see where his character journey started and how he became the character he is today, and we have yet to see where Code's character journey finishes, so his character arc is simply incomplete right now. And that's okay. We don't need to get his entire backstory the moment he's introduced, and we haven't waited an abnormally long amount of time for Code's backstory, at least in terms of chapters and pages. Code stepped into the spotlight as a villain at the end of chapter 55 when he took on Ashigi's will, and part 1 ended in chapter 80, meaning we have about 25 chapters in part 1 since Code stepped up as the main villain, and now we're on chapter 2 of part 2, meaning we're at 27 chapters so far. By comparison, Orochimaru steps into the spotlight as a villain in the Forest of Death when he fights Team 7 in Chapter 47, and it's not until Chapter 121 that we start to get his full backstory, which is 74 chapters later. Each Boruto chapter is about 40 pages, while each Naruto chapter is about 16 to 17 pages, so 74 Naruto chapters would be about 31 Boruto chapters, which is more than how long we waited for Code's backstory so far. Similarly, Pain steps into the spotlight as a villain in Chapter 363 when Obito tells Pain to hunt the Nine Tails personally, and it's not until Chapter 444 that we start to get Nagato's full backstory, which is 81 chapters later, or about 34 Boruto chapters. Likewise, Madara steps into the spotlight as a villain in Chapter 559 when he's finally brought back as an Edo Tensei by Kabuto, and it's not until Chapter 620 that we finally start to get all of Hashirama and Madara's backstories, which is 61 chapters later, or about 26 Boruto chapters. So if we get Code's backstory in this current arc, then this would be about the same pace as it was for Orochimaru, Pain, and Madara. But even without his backstory, I think there's a pretty good mask and wound dynamic with Code that bears many similarities to Kabuto, Madara, Kimimaro, and Kawaki. It could be really interesting once it's all fleshed out. Enough so that I'm gonna make an entire video talking about this exact topic. So I don't think Code has been a bad character so far by any means. Of course, if Code just dies in this arc and we never get his backstory, then sure, he wouldn't be the best character in the world, but I expect to at least get something from Code. That being said, we still haven't gotten a real fleshed out backstory for Momoshiki, Kinshiki, Urashiki, or Ishiki, and 3 of them have already died, so maybe I shouldn't expect too much from Code, but at least Code has more of a backstory and character arc than these Otsutsuki do so far. But anyway, I think this is a pretty good breakdown of Code as an antagonist, as a villain, and as a character so far. I think Code did a good job as an antagonist in the Code arc. I think he's been slacking as a menacing villain, and I think his character has the right potential, but is simply incomplete. However, this arc and future arcs can easily turn Code into a menacing villain once again, and make his character even more compelling. We'll just have to wait and see what happens moving forward. At the very least, I don't think Code's L's are anywhere near as bad as people make it seem, but I want to hear what you guys think. What do you think about Code as an antagonist so far? What do you think about Code as a villain so far? And what do you think about Code as a character so far? After hearing me break everything down pretty extensively, do you think Code has been great, pretty good, just okay, pretty bad, or absolute trash in each of these 3 categories? And where would you rank Code against other Boruto villains so far? Let me know in the comment section below, but that's a wrap on today's video, so thank you guys for watching until the end.
You're already under my genjutsu.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, like the video, check out my podcast channel, check out Peak Fiction, become a member, and hit the bell icon for notifications.
Sorry, Sasuke. Maybe some other time.
Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.